Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
We're back again, ladies and gentlemen, and not much has changed. I mean, you have to look at what I call root cause, this word that's been thrown around by the government, which really is never really properly explored or identified. But I can certainly speak to you as far as the root cause for all of the dissension and division and animosity and polarization in the country, and it starts with your media. That single entity that operates without oversight. It's really very interesting. It's the only one that seems to be able to act with impunity. Although we're watching the criminal element in all of our major cities act with impunity also, which is the byproduct of a failed political system in each of those cities. But at some point in time, we're going to have to wrap our arms around what we're going to do about the media. And I know there's this whole question regarding the First Amendment and censorship and all these really interesting concepts that are highly relevant in a perfect world. We're not in a perfect world. And we're suffering and struggling through the manner in which the media operates. They've chosen to become extensions of political parties instead of, I would say, providing us subjective, truthful information that you can then digest and formulate your own opinion. They're just tearing the country apart, more so even than the elected officials, because they even control what elected officials get to say and what's aired and provided to the public. They are entirely too powerful, period. And I know no one wants to go down this avenue because of what I mentioned a moment ago about the First Amendment. I understand the First Amendment also says you're not allowed to yell fire in a movie theater. Well, we're pretty much yelling fire every day in this country, whether it's truth-based or not. And at some point in time, someone with some courage, that word that seems to be just absent in our discussions every day, is going to have to be, I would say, put into play and address this media, because a lot of your problems will go away. They create your optic and your narrative. I remind you of that on a regular basis. The interesting part about this conversation is that the way the media carries their message, a minuscule percentage of this country has it in a tailspin. Most Americans are just skipping through the day trying to figure out how they're going to feed their kids, fuel their car. You know, maybe if you have the money, take a vacation. If you have enough disposable income, buy a cell phone, a new one, a laptop. I don't know what to say about it. But we're not in as bad a shape as you would think. The media is doing this to us. It's the reality of it. And I'd be happy to sit down with any of them and, not in a contentious manner, but in a truthful, responsible manner. And they know what they're doing. The individuals, if you look up the salaries of the individuals that are on these 24-hour news cycles to start with, and also look at ABC, NBC, and CBS, the local stations, the salaries would appall you. And that's the byproduct of them just saying whatever they want to say as long as they have viewership, sponsors, and their salary. So at some point, the American public has to connect this dot and deal with the media. Maybe it's just turn it off. The interesting part of this conversation is periodically we have new media outlets pop up and represent the fact that they're going to be purely objective and truth-based. Well, that's somehow slips through the cracks. The only person I know telling you the truth every day on a consistent basis is myself, because I have no attachment to politics. I don't care about agenda. I don't care about the Republicans. I don't care about the Democrats. I care about this country, the American people. Mostly I care about our children, because they've got a bleak future based on the way we're moving about right now. And it's incumbent upon us as a whole, as a society, to become educated and to address these, I would say, imbalances in the media. Clearly, there's some of our elected officials that are off kilter, both sides of the aisle. They have their extremist wing, but there's a way to deal with them. We just vote them out and they go away, never to be heard from again, potentially. The media is this constant. I guess the only way you can lose your job in the media is if you get caught having an affair with two journalists, as they just happened with Amy Robach, I believe her name is, and T.J. Holmes on ABC. That's something, in their opinion, is egregious. That's their personal life. I have a mixed emotion about their personal lives. I'm not interested in it. I'm more interested about what they say on air and how truth-driven it is or how agenda-driven it is. Guys, you got to pull your heads out of your heinies at some point and take a stand. And you do that through voting, to be candid with you. And as we know, this November 8th didn't really go the way it should have, because what we experienced was just, I guess, an endorsement of your border policies, which they are entirely misleading you as to the gravity of this problem, the crime in your cities, this economy, which speaks for itself. You're suffering from it. And your foreign policies, which are just, I don't even know what to say about them. Starting off with this withdrawal from Afghanistan, leaving these poor women and young girls out in the cold. Forget the rest of it. The $85 billion in weaponry, that was a faux pas, no question. Surrendering Bagram Air Base, that was a biggie. But leaving these human beings out there in the cold like this was just major no-no. Now we're entertaining countries like Venezuela so we can get oil. Meanwhile, their people are fleeing to the Mexican border to get into our country. Very interesting. Iran, we're entertaining Iran having nuclear energy as they're providing support on many levels in the Ukraine, in regards to Putin's, I would say, invasion. I don't know how to, incursion. I don't know how to quantify what he did in the Ukraine except unjust. I'm just wondering what's going on in this country and why we just lack that voice, that leadership. And I oftentimes remind everyone the last time we had someone that really spoke to this nation as a whole or galvanized the nation was John Kennedy. Reagan did it a little bit. Let's be fair to President Reagan. He was, people were enamored with him. He was a great speaker. And he was a great thinker, too, a very simplistic thinker, which is a lot of what's left of the equation. I live by this keep it simple, stupid, KISS, We've walked away from that. Foreign policies in this country, doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're looking at, they've been bad. This whole insinuation into the Middle East was ill-conceived. I don't know what to say to you except this is your country and it's incumbent upon you to take it back. But I'm going to tell you this. You have to become educated, and that's part of what this show's about. This is not about spoon-feeding you information and just having you believe me blindly. That's not the exercise. And in saying that, please don't be misled by what you hear in this 24-hour news cycle or NBC, ABC, CBS, all of which have clearly defined where they stand politically. This Hunter Biden laptop, it's tough getting a straight story here, folks. We seem to have only one media outlet that gives it any play. All of a sudden, though, the New York Times and other publications are starting to realize where there was smoke, there's probably fire here. And now we're trying to identify the extent of the flames and have they compromised the office of the President of the United States. I want to say something to you, and I want to say this as kindly as I possibly can. But this is something that is pretty much factual. A junkie is a junkie. Once they're a junkie, they're always a junkie. They're one breath away from falling back. The interesting thing about them is that there is no line in the sand they will not cross. There is no one they will not put into harm's way, including their father and mother, their president. So, long story short, keep your eye on this thing with Hunter Biden. We're going to be bringing on two very interesting guests today, Jeff Mueller and Steve Sullivan. I'm not going to tell you much about their backgrounds. I'm going to allow them to tell you because there are certain sensitivities attached to it. I do want to remind you about Buzzsprout and Instacart, our sponsors. We'll talk a little later to them in the show, but they are legitimate, and what they promise you, they deliver. So we're going to be right back, and we're going to come right into our two guests today. And thank you for joining us. We'll be right back. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and joining us right now is Jeff Mueller and Steve Sullivan. I mentioned to you in the introduction I wasn't going to tell you much about their backgrounds because there are certain sensitivities. I would say they both have had very interesting careers. Perhaps the thing most notable is they're just great men. They're great Americans. They love this country. And every day they live to make this place better than they found it. And those are big words. There are hardly people I trust with my life these days. Both of these men, I certainly do. So I want to give you both an opportunity. First, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I want to get into some good subject matter about cyber and school safety and all of these things you gentlemen have been undertaking recently and who you may be undertaking them with, depending on your ability to divulge their identities. How about you start, Jeff?
All right. Thanks, Lou. Well, first of all, thanks for having Steve and I on the program, and we look forward to a great 50 minutes coming up. Maybe I'll start with my background. I'll go all the way back to start at the US Naval Academy, where I graduated from. Then spent just about almost 11 years as a naval officer, working on ships, deploying out to sea. Spent 7 months during the first Gulf, running around over there. Came back to the academy in a structured capacity, and then really had to decide what to do after that. So I got out of the military, went into the FBI, where I spent just shy of a 22-year career. Early days, I was running around south side of Chicago and other areas as a working violent crimes and as a SWAT team agent, and then also a sniper for just about 7 years. So got to know the city pretty well. After that, shortly after that, we, of course, came upon 9/11. And after that, a majority of us were shifted over to work counterterrorism matters. And within that, very shortly after that, Director Freeh decided to address, at the time, an up-and-coming threat issue, which was weapons of mass destruction. So with my background in the Navy, where I had been what they call a CBRNE officer, so that's chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosives officer, received a lot of training. Director Freeh called upon me to be one of the co-founders of the new directorate or division in the FBI. And I spent pretty much the rest of my time in the Bureau working on building up that directorate. I ended up running the program domestically for protection of critical infrastructure. So we worked with all of the 18 sectors at the time of the U.S. critical infrastructure. And then in 2008, I founded the Interpol program, which mirrored the FBI's program. Ran that from Washington for about 6 years with both our money and our expertise. And then in 2014, I went over to Lyon, France, to FBI or to Interpol headquarters and ran the program as a director. We expanded all of our preventative measures and training out to about 155 countries at that time. And then 2016, I retired, started up a global security company doing much of the same type of work, working for a number of U.S. government agencies and international organizations, and also NGOs, so non-government organizations, and really just trying to train our allies, many partner countries, in how to protect their countries, their citizens, their children, as we were doing. And in the meantime, Steve Sullivan and I, Sully, met, and we decided, with both of our backgrounds, his a very technical background, which he'll go over, we would form a new company. And that company focused heavily on partnering with new-to-market security technologies, which I know we'll get into a little bit more. But
give us the name of that company, Jeff, if you don't mind. Give us the name of the company.
Yeah, that company, the first company, my service, the global service company, is Mueller Group International, and the company which Sully and I co-founded is Prevenitas. So we named it, obviously, to focus on prevention. We feel very strongly that utilizing our experience and the technology that continues to evolve and be developed should be focused on prevention, right? We don't want to be coming in after the fact with our technology after an incident has already happened or people have been hurt or killed. We want to be able to prevent that. So hence the name Prevenitas.
Interesting concept in a society that's reactive, Jeff. You know what I mean? I mean, that just seems to be something that's indigenous to the country. We just are reactive instead of preventative, as you're mentioning right now. I do want to say, Jeff, I think we owe you an apology for not affording you a more in-depth background. I mean, I can see they shortchanged you in your journey. But continue. Go ahead, buddy.
No, I'll just finish up quickly because I want to get into Sully's background and then, of course, into the company and some of the issues of the day. So once we formed Prevenitas, we worked with many, for everything from U.S. government agencies, Fortune 100 companies, helping them to better protect themselves, all the way down to individual citizens who we help to train on situational awareness, and even down to working with families, right, who had concerns about their children going to school and wanting them to better understand without scaring them how they can better protect themselves. So, we have the full spectrum, the full range of being able to go out and do a threat vulnerability assessment in a nuclear power plant in a country overseas, all the way down to working with, our citizens here in the U.S. to help protect them. A number of companies are bringing us and our experts in to help train their employees on how to react during an active shooter or workplace violence incident as well. So we work with some of the world's leading experts in those fields. And we look at it not only from the tactical side, working with guys that are former FBI SWAT team or hostage rescue team members, but really looking at it from the psychological side as well. So I'll stop there and I'll maybe send it over to Sully to get into his background and then look forward to proceeding.
So, Steve, you and I are Brooklyn boys, as we know. And I know that you have to be.
Hold it against us, Will.
I know that they try to, Steve, but I do know you're going to have to be rather selective in discussing your background. So give us what you're prepared to divulge.
I appreciate it, Jeff. I appreciate what Jeff just said. And Lou, I appreciate you and our friendship go back many years and have crossed a lot of paths. And growing up in Brooklyn makes you a little bit different than the average guy on the street. But my background is strictly has always been in cyber, specialized in software. Some of my background, I started out with IBM many years ago, built a number of companies and technologies there. I specialized in the healthcare space. And then there was sort of where I got picked up to do some work for one of the agencies, dropping back to when Jeff talked about 9/11, that's when the whole world changed for me. They said, could I put together a technology team and build a technology that would be able to handle, at the time was called unstructured data. If you go back, showing our age, at least my age, go back 20 years, the computer systems were basically index files, big data files, and everything was indexed that way. But they didn't know how to handle all the agencies that were being troubled after 9/11. They didn't know how to handle a PDF or an email or a Word document. And there were people in buildings sitting around the country trying to read emails to try to find out what was going on. So we were charged with putting together a software technology that would be able to handle unstructured data, which I did. After that, I was got involved with a high-powered individual in the government and said, hey, Sully, would you be willing to help me? I said, what would you need? He said, I look at technologies of all kinds, military, chem bio, software. He said, I've got what he called 800-pound heads. He said, I deal with them, but would you be willing to take a look at any of this technology for me? And for 3 years, I gladly did that because I love my country. And it was sort of it was on the arm kind of thing, Lou. I didn't want anything for it. And after looking at some of these things, I asked him, I said, is there any chance that we could take this into the private sector? And that's what I did. And Jeff, through mutual friends in the FBI, people that I've worked with, we got together and I said, look, I've got the technology and the Rolodex, you've got the experience and background, let's put something together that would protect our country. And the biggest asset that Jeff and I have always felt is most important to this country is our children. And that's where we really got our first big jump into this thing, which I'll stop there, but it's a great capability is what we put together.
Like I say, I wish you guys had something better to do with your time. It doesn't seem like you've done enough. I mean, seriously, it sounds like you both have been sitting on your hands. Seriously speaking, though, give us a little insight into what you're currently doing. Like, what are you guys entertaining right now? I know we spoke about it earlier in our conversations. We speak on a fairly regular basis. Just so people do understand, I've been in this industry about 42 years. And we kind of dawdled along. We were I would say, alpha and the omega, private security, protecting high visibility people, large events, so on and so forth. 9/11, we shifted gears, and gentlemen like this became a big part of my support mechanism because my business to do it properly has to rely a lot on technology, which is why I developed a relationship with Jeff and Steve, and they are my support mechanism. But give us a little background as to what you guys are currently up to.
Thanks, Lou. Yeah, I'll start with I'll break it up into the service side and then go to the product side, because we felt that there's a million technology companies out there. They've got engineers and scientists, and they're fantastic, and they do a great job developing the technologies that we utilize, but they don't always have the background to be able to apply those to kind of day-to-day life and the threats that we see, not only in the U.S. but around the world. So the interaction between the service company, MGI, and Prevenitas is kind of a day-to-day, and you really can't even tell the difference when you're working with us. From the service side, we are doing, on a constant basis for the last 6 years, we've been training police forces and individuals both in the U.S. and abroad. We've been in about 32 countries each year. And again, that's at the behest, contracted by different U.S. government agencies, Department of State, Department of Energy, for example. I track it all on this big map back here so I can keep track of where all of our people are. And so we do that on a constant basis. We work with the United Nations also. They have a number of great programs that they help to do what they call capacity building, which is really just ensuring that we can provide knowledge and perhaps equipment to countries so that their forces can better protect their own countries and therefore kind of form a ring of protection around our country. We also do threat vulnerability assessments. So we send experts out both in the United States and they could be assessing a single building. They could be assessing a home, or they could be assessing a full global supply chain. So again, we've worked with Fortune 100 companies. We've worked with individuals and families. It doesn't matter. We want to help everybody that we can. So, and then the last part on the service side, we do investigations. So of course, with our network, we have a very significant pool of investigators from many, many different agencies, both local, city, state, federal, and a lot of different alphabet soup agencies. So those are kind of the service-related issues. And then really what it translates down to after that is, once we identify what the vulnerability is in a building, let's say, how do we fix it, right? How do we provide a solution? And that's where Prevenitas comes in and can provide. We have partnerships with about 18 different types of technology, all new to market, what we believe are the best in class technology solutions. And we can not only provide, a single one. If they want millimeter wave weapon detection to detect a weapon as somebody's walking into a facility, we can provide that. But we'll talk a little bit more about our school solution later, which integrates 5 different technologies into kind of an outer perimeter on in to a protective inner perimeter. So again, our primary focus is prevention, if we can stop it from happening. But after that, we want to be able to mitigate, right? We want to be able to provide the tools and the information to what I used to do, responding tactical officers, so where they can go. For example, if they're going to a very large high school that they've never been to before, instead of entering the nearest door and having to do what we call a law enforcement clear, a tactical clear as quick as they can while being safe, they can go directly to the door where the shooter is. And so they can be much more effective and efficient and mitigate and save lives.
Explain how they're able to identify, though, Jeff. Well, you know what, Jeff, let me do this. Let me take a quick break, and I want to come back to you, and I want to continue with this conversation, because I think you can tell it's going to get quite interesting, especially when we start talking about school safety and drones and cyber. We're going to be right back, guys. Just stick with me, please. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, and if you've been listening, I have two gentlemen with me today that I'm proud to have an association with, Jeff Mueller and Steve Sullivan. They've given you a little bit of their background on their own because there are some sensitivities based on past exploits. But, Jeff, I want to get back to this discussion right now with this whole securing the learning environment for our children, because I think there probably isn't many things that are secondary to that in the culture today, especially with this volume of mass shootings that we've had take place in the learn. It isn't just the learning environments also, Jeff, Steve, let's be honest. Malls, movie theaters, correct me if I'm wrong.
Houses of worship.
Absolutely, houses of worship. So go ahead, continue, Jeff, and then I want to, Steve, bring you in to discuss this issue with cyber and the volume of attacks and, so on and so forth. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, so I think we were talking about how the technology can be utilized to both prevent and provide better situational awareness to not only responding law enforcement officers, but also to potential victims, so that they can actually have the awareness in a situation, in an evolving situation, where they can make decisions to save themselves, right, and their families. Or if you're a teacher, children. And I'll give you an example. We'll go into a little bit more detail, I'm sure, on the our Safe at School program. But essentially, I'll use an example. After one of the shootings, and I don't want to focus on any one specifically. Everybody knows, how horrific it is, and that we have many of them.
Jeff, there was one. I don't know if you guys really want to critique it, because I said to you guys coming in, this is not contention. We're not here really to demean anybody or ridicule anybody. But the one in Uvalde caught quite a bit of attention for a myriad of reasons. Are you inclined to critique that at all? Do you want to say pass on it? And I leave it to you, buddy.
Yeah, I'd really rather not. Again, unless you're in that situation, Lou, and as a working violent crimes in Chicago, and then working as a SWAT team officer, I'm not inclined to second guess unless I was there, right? And so there are too many factors. But what I do want to focus on is how, in that instance, or in any of these other school shootings, or could be a shooting we've seen at retail stores, right? I mean, we see those on a frequent basis, where a former employee or a jaded ex-spouse or girlfriend or boyfriend come back and with ill intent. So what we do is we first provide detection systems, right? So in the case of our school solution, the outer layer has to be a focus on social media. Okay, so we can set up what's called a geofence, where in that area, if there's mention made of that school, or of some keywords such as kill, shoot, hate, bomb, any of those words we want to enter, we can have a proactive solution that is looking for kind of the first signs of a discussion regarding an upcoming event. And again, we don't address. We work with behavioralists and psychologists as well to be able to present a full solution, and we understand that, and we understand, and we've read all of the Secret Service and FBI reports, on the continuing evolution of all of these shootings. So we keep up to that, but again, our focus is on the technology side and on the prevention.
Let me, Jeff, if I can just interrupt you for one moment, because you touched on something that's very, very important, and that's the tells. When these kids get onto social media and they start throwing words around, or agendas that they're considering they want to entertain, but what is it we can do, when a kid starts to get on and starts to mention about, he's angry with the kids in his class and he's thinking about killing one of them. You and I both know that the teachers, for example, have had their horns clipped, to put it politely. I don't know, Jeff, if going back as far as you, but Steve and I both remember by background, we had a lot of discipline, a lot of oversight when we were in school. Today, the teachers are afraid to look at the kids wrong for fear they could lose their jobs or be sued because you emotionally harmed them by looking at them. So can you give us a little insight as to what should be done when we are starting to pick up on this chatter, right, on the social media outlets or however else they're communicating? What's a recommendation there for both the academic environment and law enforcement as to how to key on that and kind of head this off?
Yeah, and thanks, Lou. You're being kind. I've been on the wrong end of a wooden spoon or two back in the day as a.
I am trying to be nice to you.
Thank you. But yeah, I think a couple of the things to consider. One, you have to have a program in place, right? There has to be awareness of what we need to focus on. So, time and again, we all say, oh, that was the same tell or indicator happened or should have happened with this individual, and it should have been caught because it happened in the last 10 shootings, right? So there's not a lot of variation on what we see in the lead up, the behavioral and the lead up to these. Now, it might alter if the individual, is a prolific user of social media or not. But in some context, whether it's speaking with friends, writings that they're doing at home or in school or in social media, there are clear indicators that happen. And so I think, number one, when we go out and talk to schools, you have to have a program that trains the teachers, right? And you have to have a staff, whether it's your guidance counselor staff or whoever you want to train, to really be the focal point where people can report to. And I don't mean report in a negative sense, right? We have to make sure that somebody feels comfortable coming forward, that they're not going to, their name's not going to be announced as somebody who, who tattled on somebody, depending on what age group, or, they were a rat coming forward, whatever the concerns are. We have to have a system in place where somebody can come through, and it could be anonymous, right? And they put a, report and say, hey, I heard this individual at lunch talking about this, or I saw it on their social media. So I think we have to socialize it better with, within the school system, within the teachers, so that they know what to listen for, to focus on. There should be training also for students. Look, I mean, we're working on another project where kids are being interviewed. And the fact of the matter is, at a very young age, they're very aware of this issue. One, because they're having to go through, the old fire drills are gone, and now it's active shooter training, right? What do you do? How do you hide? Where do you hide in the classroom to be out of the line of fire? As terrible as that sounds, that's a fact of life. They're going through it. They're expressing the concerns and about their safety. It's hard enough to go through school with the social issues as the kids are growing up. Now you have to add in the potential for a violent incident, and how do you survive that? So that's number one, is socialization. Number two, much more proactively, is to bring in either establish your own or bring in outside assistance, whether it's with your local police or whether you bring in an outside company, and that can develop a proactive system for possibly being able to identify these issues. Now, we know, no one system is 100%, Lou, and we'll tell you that even when we put 5 layers in place. You can't, as we saw with 9/11, as we continuously see, the evolution of threats, they learn, right? They learn from our preventative measures. So we can't always be 100%, but we can be a lot better than we are by layering in systems to be able to address it, whether it's, the behavioral, the social, or the technological. So I think, what I'd like to do is maybe if Sully can talk a little bit about, we were asked specifically by the New York State Senate to address the development or the development of a bill, like a school safety program, and how we would build that out. And it actually got built into the draft of a very, I think, over $2 billion bill, which did not end up getting pushed through, but it specifically identified some of the technology solutions that we had. So, maybe, if you could talk about that, and then we could get back to the technology piece and talk about the layers and the types of technology.
Yeah, one thing I do want to get into, guys, right, following Steve's comments, I want to get into this technology, like the shot spotting, and how do you identify exactly in an environment where the shooter is, so the cops don't have to go around fishing, for where the individual is. We're both familiar with thermal imaging, things of that nature. But go ahead, Steve. I want you to take the floor right now, sir.
When after the Parkland shooting, we had multiple phone calls from all over the place, Texas, you name it. Everybody was calling, what do we do to protect our schools? So, Jeff and I were asked we talked to a couple of senators in New York at the time. A gentleman Marty Golden was one of the senators that was driving the bill. and another senator, he was the majority leader, he asked us, could we design a integrated program? So what we did is we created a safe in school program for them, which started with the deep dark web, looking for bad actions, someone threatening, so you'd know where it was. We were able to put facial recognition. We put weapons detection in. We put in shot detection, situational awareness. So we designed the whole storyline for them, made the presentation up to the Senate, and they loved it. I mean, they absolutely loved it. And then through the information that we created, the core technologies that we gave them, they created this bill. And it was in 2018, I don't remember the bill number, I could get it for you. And it was almost about $2 billion, where they specifically stated they wanted to bring New York into the 20th century. So we were going to be able to do that. And then it never, they lost majority in the House, and the bill sort of like died. And now it's back again. Everybody's asking, what do we do to protect the schools? Similar situation. After that, they saw what we did. We were asked to bring our technology to the US Open. The US Open 2 years ago was concerned about drones. So we were able to bring in advanced technology and deployed it at the US Open to be able to monitor where drones were, who was using them, who was operating them. We also have the capability with our technology to actually take over the drone, but you can't do that. Only Homeland Security can do that, but we were able to identify them. And then we did such a good job there, they asked us to do the same thing.
Steve, let me stop here a second. Get a little more in depth as to what exactly we can do with this whole drone issue, because we speak about it. Look, I'm on the learning curve from the both of you. I make no bones about it. What I've garnered, and not a lot of information, but I'm becoming more literate. Speak about this whole drone issue, about identification as to whether it's hostile or control, what you're allowed to do legally, so go a little bit more into that, Steve.
It's interesting because the scary thing is that 90% of the drones are made by China. And the Chinese are able to identify the actual inner workings of the drones. Funny story, when we were doing the US Open, there was another company there, and they were able to identify the drone, who manufactured it. But when we found out it was a Chinese drone, and you're able to do that. They're capable, like, you and I have talked offline, Lou, we're good with what we do with the technology, but the bad guys have started to catch up. We lost a number of our military from drone strikes. These drones are very capable. We can literally isolate them. We can literally control them only if there's a government or department, I think it's the Homeland Security, can touch. We can't take control of it, but we can, in some situations, send them back. We could show where the operator is from an offensive position. There also is defensive capability, where we have the ability to use drones to work for us, monitoring, protecting a home, going out, doing camera movements. And we used to use them for the military. You could actually find where people are behind buildings and things like that. So the drones are very powerful.
Steve, I want to interrupt you for 1 second, if I may, sir. Are we doing anything to, I would say, develop our own drones? You and I have spoken about this whole chip issue, China and Taiwan, and supposedly the country's in a very proactive mode of developing chips ourselves. Are we doing that with drones, Steve, so we're not, again, dependent upon a country that we can't buy a flashlight or power it with the battery unless it's from China? Are we doing anything there, buddy, would you know?
They started, but still the Chinese have two of the largest drone manufacturers in the world. India has started. I know we're doing some work with it. The funny thing, at one point, the government was using drones from China, and then they stopped using it because of the concern they had. So, we haven't seen what they've been doing recently. We stay in good touch because we have people that we work with very closely that keep telling us what's going on. But these drones are very capable, both offensively and defensively. You could actually part people's hair from the sky.
Steve, on that note, I want to take a quick break, and we're going to come right back to this discussion. We want to talk about these drones some more, and I think it's worth noting, and I don't want to get political in any, because that's not the purpose of this podcast. We're not out here to get contentious and to point fingers, but I don't think there's any secret that we're learning through the media, ironically, that Iran has employed these drones as well as the Russians and utilized them in the Ukraine. Guys, we're going to come right back. We're going to continue this conversation. Just stick with me, please. Okay. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. With me today is Jeff Mueller and Steve Sullivan. They have a joint venture called Prevenitas, interesting name because we live in a culture that's kind of, I would say, reactive. So they're really out here trying to guide people, not just here in the United States, but in other countries, on how to prevent issues and mitigate. And it's really an interesting discussion. Steve, I want to come back to you now and let you continue on this discussion with this drone issue. And I mentioned, we have Iran supplying drones, correct me if I'm wrong, to Putin in the Ukraine. Am I correct in that assumption, Steve?
Correct. Yes. Yes. And the thing is a couple of years ago, we were so far ahead of the curve. And part of the problem when you're getting into cyber, not just the physical and destructive end, being hacked, the concern that Jeff and I also are working very close with is, believe it or not, is healthcare. You've got the large hospital systems. Almost all of these hospital systems are actually targets. We were dealing with some people outside the United States that are specialized in the cyber, and the couple of big hospital systems outside the country in England and one in Australia was hacked. The other night, I had a conversation with a gentleman that a major healthcare system in this country, their medical record system was hacked, and rather than pay the ransom, they rebuilt the entire technology in 10 days. They wouldn't pay the ransom. But that's the kind of exposure we have. They're either hacking it, picking up our software, and disabling, an MRI machine. And the sad thing is these healthcare technology companies and the facilities are there to help people. They're really not made to defensively build technology to protect themselves. That's not their role.
What do we do, Steve, moving forward to mitigate this concern, like the one you just identified with healthcare? What should we be doing to offset that so they don't have the ability to come in and hack and steal records, which they've done even with the federal government, we know? What do we do about this?
Well, that's one of the key things, that there is so much knowledge in this country, more so in the private sector, believe it or not, than in the military side. That's where some of the talent is. They need to be able to go in and first biggest problem, like Jeff said something before, most people don't understand they have a problem. They really don't. And that's the problem. If a hospital doesn't believe that they can be hacked and the skill set is not there, there's companies out there that can go in and do full assessments, whether it's our company, there's others out there that would go through their network and be able to harden it for them, because they've never had to do this.
How do we encourage them, though, Steve? Hold on a second, buddy. But how do we encourage the hospital, the healthcare system? What about this most recent? Remember the incident we had earlier this year where they hacked, I believe it was an oil company. What was that?
Colonial Pipeline.
What was it again, sir?
Yep, it was the Colonial Pipeline.
Yeah, the Colonial Pipeline. What has to happen, say, from a governmental standpoint, that they mandate that, say, companies such as Colonial or the healthcare people start to retain the services of companies like yours to conduct these vulnerability assessments? Once again, we're talking about preventative. Is there a way that we can say that you have to do this because of the sensitivity of what you're doing every day in your work environment?
Well, what you're saying, Lou, is what's happening. Okay, major insurers, whether it's Medicare, are putting restraints on them and said, look, if you're not hardening, you don't have a rules-based protection for your place, you could have an example is, I can't give the name of the organization, but they had an issue. And then when they were audited, they were told they had to fix it. They ended up having their reimbursement modified until they were able to show they could tighten the thing. That's the way you do it. You put pressure on the organization to say, look, financially, if you are found to have vulnerability and you have a pen test done and someone can get in and do something, you could be penalized for it. There's got to be a penalty for them being hacked if they didn't do something.
Wasn't that the case, Steve, with Colonial, by the way?
I'm sorry?
Wasn't that the case with Colonial, that they had old software from Microsoft, I believe it was?
Well, here's what it was. You get a major multi-corporation that has old versions of software. I mean, I can't give you the specifics, but it was like running with a 1957 Dodge. A lot of the companies have not hardened their own technology. It wasn't a specific company's software, but they were not hardened. A company that big should have been much better, reinforced with their networks, their servers, and everything else, and better backup. But they never had this problem before.
So give us, with being as discreet as you can be, give us just a couple of examples, perhaps without identifying who the group or individual might be, that what you did to help prevent, so to speak, what happened with Colonial. You guys know where I'm going with this. I'm just trying to be very diplomatic so we don't, disclose identities of clients that are highly sensitive, or even the government. Tell us a little bit, what you've done in this environment to help them prevent what happened with Colonial, for example, and the healthcare system.
Well, without giving there was one big, large organization that Jeff and I were asked to review their complete network, everything from their nodes, their servers, their security capabilities, vulnerabilities, and we did. We went through the entire.
Did they do that, Steve? Did they do that proactively?
Yes.
They didn't have an issue. There was nothing pending. There was nothing. They just came to you independently and said, "We have a concern.
Yeah.
Can you gentlemen help us?"
Absolutely. Yeah, that's what happened.
And in fact, Lou, they combined that with the physical assessment as well. So we brought in both the physical assessment into the network assessment as well. And in some cases, they overlap, right? If you have a server room and you have a 6-second delay door, and it makes it very easy for somebody to be able to, what they call tailgate, walk in behind somebody and get into that server room, or after they leave and the door stays open for 6 seconds, you can be hiding around the corner and enter it and be in there without any detection. So, sometimes there's an overlap between the physical and the cyber, which we help companies address. And Lou, if we have time, I'd like to just follow up on a couple of issues. One is I want to get a little bit more into how, from the proactive and preventative side, we have utilized drones. And so this particular case was the Fort Lauderdale International Boat Show, right? And it is a major event with, very high net worth individuals and companies represented, and crowds in the hundreds of thousands. So we were brought in by the show producer and also the lead security company that was providing the guards, and they had concerns about some threats. And in this case, it was threats to one of the individuals who owned one of the very, very large yachts, and it was from a domestic environmentalist group. And so we did a number of things. One, we ended up establishing an operations center for them, both a technical operations center and then an intelligence center. We did work in conjunction with the FBI and state and local police. We integrated, at that time, 8 different technology solutions. Another concern they had was they wanted to make sure everybody got screened coming into the show, but they also didn't want there to be a delay. So with your old magnetometers and the old system of having to have individuals wanding and putting your bags through the system, they were having delays of up to an hour 20 minutes for people to be able to get into the show. So utilizing new technology, just 2 portals of the new millimeter wave weapon detection, where you could walk through without having to take things out of your pockets, without having to do a bag check. You simply walk through with your bag. We were able to reduce that down to less than 15 minutes.
And Jeff, can I just ask you about that? And that technology has the ability to discern between a weapon, the density of steel associated with a weapon, and your pen or your cell phone. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. It is very sensitive. There's training involved, but again, they're being utilized across stadiums, across malls, schools, and so it is a simple matter of training the personnel, the guards, the security personnel, to a level that they can just understand what the indications mean. But absolutely, we can set the sensitivity where it needs to be to focus on what your threat is. If you have a concern about just handguns and above, meaning all the way up to compact machine guns or shotguns, or vests filled with shrapnel, that's kind of one level, and the next level down is then worrying about knives, and then it goes below that. So of course you have to set the sensitivity to be able to focus on what your protocol is going to be. What's your threat that you're concerned about, or what is, we had a school system come to us and they said, look, we're concerned about kids bringing razor blades in their hair into school, smuggling them in their hair. Can you detect that? And we said, well, you can, but utilizing that technology, the problem is you're going to detect everything above that, right, in size and mass. So, it's a fine balance between understanding your threat. So anyway, we were able to, utilize that without any negative effect. And in fact, the interesting thing is when you're working with, an issue where you have an entrance, and in this case, they had to then show their tickets to another, beyond the security, they had to show their tickets to another layer of personnel to get into the show. The problem was we were moving them in so fast that the ticket people couldn't keep up with us. So, it taught a lesson where if they're going to use this enhanced throughput technology, they really have to worry about maybe adding a few more personnel on the back end so that they can have a seamless or use a biometric solution so they don't actually have to, have a paper ticket. Right.
Jeff,
but,
we're running out of time. I warned you guys about this before we started this because this could go on forever because there's a lot of other areas I want to talk to you about. One of them, which we probably won't be able to get to today, deals with this facial recognition. And as you guys are aware, politically, it got some pushback, ACLU. I think law enforcement agencies were entertaining using it. Am I correct?
Yeah, and in fact, it is being utilized in some cases by, again, now the privacy issue we all fully understand, but the issue of if you're in a school, and I know we want to focus on maybe with our last time here on safe schools because that's where we want to focus our efforts. But if you have a pedophile, recognized pedophile in the area of your school, or you have an individual that was kicked out of school and is not supposed to be on school grounds. A school can, in most cases, establish a database where they put the face, the biometrics. You don't have to put data with name or any, social security, date of birth, any of that. You just simply have to put the face at that point. And then when that individual comes onto that property with ill intent, it will identify them immediately and can send an alert to, the school resource officer, the local police, the principal, whatever you want to set it at. So there are ways to utilize biometrics, and it's being utilized. I mean, if you go to Apple Pay or you go to rent a car these days, it's being utilized in many, many different instances in daily life.
I just want to remind you guys of something that, my business, we've done these employee dismissals, and based on my understanding of facial recognition through the both of you, I've made suggestions to the corporations that, we can feed in the photograph of the individual that you're dismissing. And when they break the camera lens, you'll immediately be notified on your smartphone or your computer or whatever. A lot of it, again, comes back to them wanting to invest in it. We're in an interesting industry. We don't generate revenue, as you both know. We are an expenditure. We're going to have to cut this today, unfortunately, but I want you guys to come back. I want us to have a much more in-depth and further discussion regarding this school safety, because that's a big one. We didn't have an opportunity to talk about the utilization of technology via drones, for example, at our border, our southern border. I don't want to get political about it, but we have a problem there. Even the Democratic elected officials at the border are yelling for help, so we're not picking on anybody. We're just trying to tell the truth at this point, but promise you'll come back. I do want to talk about the technology and how it could aid us at the border. You guys both hear this term, gotaways, and I try to explain to people that those numbers are the byproduct of cameras and drones accounting for people crossing the border that are not having interaction with any of our law enforcement mechanism. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Right, you're correct.
Right.
Yeah. All right, guys, listen, let's call this one a day. I got to tell you, I want to make sure you guys come back because there's a lot more to speak about. When we were talking in general, this could go on for hours, this discussion, and it can go off on tangents. Unfortunately, we really can't get into too much of background information on the both of you or some of the sensitivity of the clients you've worked with for obvious reasons. You don't want to lose a client to do a podcast with me. I would appreciate it, but I do understand.
Well, one thing, Lou, I'd love to throw before we get off.
Sure.
Another area we'd love to continue with you is Jeff and I, besides the Safe in School from the physical structure, we worked with the chemical and bio with some of the COVID and other bacterias and stuff. We've got a technology that is unbelievable, developed by the government. So we implemented that security also. So there's another good topic. So the school's protected physically and chemically with some of the technologies.
Steve, you know this thing about technology today, I don't want to use something as trite as it's the wave of the future. We're just living it every day, and it's evolving as we're speaking. Here's one thing I do want to mention. We can do part 2 of this next week if you gentlemen have a schedule that's available. I'd like to continue this conversation because there's a lot of tangential discussions that take place regarding technology and how vast it's become and how it's critically important that we implement it into our daily lives. The average American, as you know, is just doting along, trying to take care of their kids, get them educated, buy them Christmas gifts, figure out if we're going to take them on vacation, can we afford to gas a car. But what we're talking about here deals with the safety of this nation and whether or not we're going to be here in a decade or two. And I have to tell you, I'm of grave concern about the future of the country. I don't like this dependency upon any foreign country. I'm not picking on China, any foreign country for a toothpick today. It was a noble notion that I think that came back to bite us in the booty. I think you'll both agree with that. But we're going to close for now. As we both know, you gentlemen know, and myself, we're committed to what we're doing for our children. It's about their future. I often kid, especially you and I, Steve, not so much Jeff, because he's a lot younger than we are,
Yeah.
that we're going to hop, skip, and jump through this journey. What's that, Jeff?
I was teased about taking that dirt nap, so I want to take care of my kids and grandkids.
Me too, buddy. We're going to skip through this. Let's be honest. But what's being left for our children in the future of this country is just questionable. So, guys, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to speak afterwards to just kind of do a postmortem on our own. I wanted to be responsible to the both of you, not to go down avenues that could potentially compromise you professionally and personally and in any capacity. So thanks for today, guys. It's been...
We're not trying to have waterboarding as a sport, Lou. So, be gentle with us.
Listen, I think we should go to Mexico and open up a swim school. So, guys, we'll hopefully catch you next week.
Sounds good, Lou.
Okay, guys, we'll get back to you then.
Have a great holiday, Lou and the family. Stay well and stay safe.
You too, buddy. Thank you so much. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it.
That's it, guys, for today. I hope you found this interesting. There's a lot more to say about technology. And, one thing I want to say about it, in listening to this today, it should give you some comfort because there are a lot of people like Steve and Jeff, maybe not as good, to be honest with you, because they're on the cutting edge. That's why I'm involved with them myself, because my business has always been perceived as being on the cutting edge. Today, I rely upon them as a big support mechanism, and so should you. We'll see you next week, guys, and hopefully we'll see Steve and Jeff next week. Thank you for joining us today.
Take care.
Bye now.